Hello, I'm Salty Duchess. Today, in part 3 of my long look at Delta Green, we are examining the combat section of the Agent's Handbook. Quick link up here if you'd like to start at the beginning, but for everyone else, let's just get into it. Delta Green aims for a very fast and lethal combat style that has enough randomness of chance that even skilled combatants aren't safe during combat, and that rings quite true in my experience. Combat in Delta Green is measured in turns, which last typically a few seconds. The game isn't specific about precisely how long a turn is because they're leaning slightly narrative rather than simulationist with how they want you to think of time during combat. Sometimes quicker combat turns will make more sense, and sometimes longer combat turns will make more sense. The turn order is determined by the dex characteristic of the combatants. You start with whoever has the highest dex and just work your way down. If dex scores tie and a tiebreaker is actually required, then by the book the handler chooses who goes first, but I would lean more towards a roll-off to see who goes first personally. Or if you're not great at communication and one of your players is still on your shit list for taking the last slice of pizza that one time, even though you brought the pizza and everyone knows whoever brought the pizza has dibs on the last slice if they want, and also they stole your credit card to buy access to your ex's OnlyFans, then instead of tackling those issues, you can just have them go last. They'll probably pick up the hint eventually or just slowly drift away from you, wondering why you became such a dick out of nowhere. On your turn, you can do one of the following actions, and that's it. It's a very simple action economy here. We have aim, attack, called shot, disarm, dodge, escape, fight back, move, pin, wait, and other stuff. If you aim, you get a 20% bonus to an attack on and only on your next turn, unless you take damage before then, which breaks your concentration, and then the bonus is just lost. Quick question, does this get used by anyone? I mean, how often does someone prefer a 20% bonus rather than just shooting twice? It reminds me of the True Strike cantrip in D&D that gives you advantage against a specific enemy only on your next turn. It's like, oh cool, I get to roll 2 dice. But if I just attacked now and next turn, I'd get to roll 2 dice as well. I guess with this, A, the attack can be against any target, and B, maybe there is a relatively limited set of circumstances where you only have one shot, or it's extremely important for one shot to hit, but I personally have not seen it yet. With an attack, you make a skill check based on the weapon you're using, like firearms, melee weapons, unarmed combat, and if it hits, you get to roll damage for the attack. If you make an unarmed or melee attack, your character is considered to be parrying and blocking. For this, you'll actually want to keep track of your result because now, until the start of your next turn, all incoming melee or unarmed attacks, disarms, pins, or called shots will now be opposed rolls against that result. Obviously, you still need to be able to see and defend against the incoming attack for this to work, and ranged attacks ignore parrying and blocking unless they are within arm's reach. Managing that parrying and blocking status can be a bit tricky at first, but honestly, I haven't had to manage it that much yet. Most agents reach for a gun. No one is signing up to battle unnameable, incomprehensible horrors with a baseball bat. It's hard enough finding fresh meat dumb enough to face the unspeakable horrors, even if we're handing out machine guns like Tootsie Pops. Called shot is another action, and while the instinct might be to assume that maybe you aim for the head to do more damage or you aim for their legs to reduce their mobility, really what called shot is used for is to target an exposed area on someone who has cover or armor. You take a penalty to the roll though. It's a 20% penalty if they're half covered or so, and a 40% penalty if they're mostly covered. You also need a called shot to pick out a specific target in a crowd. Alternatively, you could just blast away into the crowd and hope your target gets hit at random. Honestly, in a lot of other systems that would mostly be a joke, but I could almost see agents getting into a situation where that sounds like an acceptable idea, given their mission parameters. Then there's the disarm action, which is exactly what it sounds like. Okay, I guess for the potentially pedantic out there, disarming someone knocks an object out of someone's grasp rather than emotionally disarming your opponent. Dodge is up next, although this action actually occurs when an attack is incoming and it is not your turn. So even though it's kind of like a reaction where something happens to you when it's not your turn and you have the chance to respond, it does eat up your action for the turn. So if you think you might need to dodge, you might want to consider actually not taking an action or taking an action that considers you to be dodging and parrying for the round. You can always dodge melee attacks or slow projectiles, but for guns, you need cover nearby, and it needs to make sense that you'd be able to scramble for that cover in response to the gunfire coming your way. In fact, I'm almost surprised that there isn't a sanity roll to see if you have the option of not choosing to dodge gunfire. Just standing firm while getting shot at is crazy, but I guess it is assumed that most of the characters would be playing agents in law enforcement. Still crazy in my opinion.
Crazy fools, the Irish!
An action that you can only take while pinned is the escape action, using your strength or your unarmed combat against whoever has you pinned, and if you succeed, you are both unpinned and considered to be parrying and blocking. Fight back, just like with dodge, is something that you do when it's not your turn in response to your enemy attacking you. And just like dodge, if you do it, you don't get an action on your next turn anymore. However, it does allow you to take an incoming unarmed or melee attack and turn it into an opposed roll. Unlike dodge, you now have a chance of hurting your assailant, but it's slightly more difficult to succeed at than dodging, assuming you have the same score in your melee attack and your dodge. You will also be considered parrying and blocking for the round. With the move action, you can cover anywhere from 10 to 30 meters, but if you're moving fast in rough terrain, you might have to make a dex roll to keep your footing. Failure will knock you prone. If you move into cover on your turn, but then get shot at within the same round, you'll actually need to make a dodge roll to gain the benefits of the cover, as narratively what occurred is they were shooting at you as you were moving into cover. So just having a high initiative doesn't necessarily guarantee cover when you're about to be shot at. Your character can move a few meters without using a move action, but anything more than that, and you'll have to dedicate your entire action to moving. This can be a bit of a tough one. Moving isn't fun, and often moving feels a bit like it does nothing. And there's so many systems that grant either free movement or the ability to combine movement with something else that it can be hard at times to just say a turn is over after moving. I guess I would say A, trying to keep the combat moving as quickly as possible will help this out a little bit, and B, if you're playing in my game and want a free move action that badly, you can Venmo me a $5 and we'll get it worked out. With a pin action, you can immobilize a target and then all incoming unarmed or melee attacks against them have a 20% bonus, including your own. Attempting to pin regardless of success means you are considered parrying and blocking for the round. I really like the fact that pinning both immobilizes the target and improves your odds of hitting with your own attacks if they can't escape. It feels like a big commitment to try to pin someone down when you could just attack them instead, and this feels that this system is at least trying to tempt you with a little bit of an ongoing benefit for that risk. You can also wait and insert yourself somewhere else in the initiative before a different character acts. You cannot interrupt someone or something else's turn by using a wait action. And finally, you can do other stuff that would be reasonably considered an action, like opening a door, reloading a gun, standing up, checking on your ex's socials, and so on. Okay, look, that last part, seriously a joke. If you're checking up on your ex's socials, go get super into one of your hobbies or go work out, uninstall socials, spend more time with friends, whatever you gotta do to get your head straight. I'm rooting for you, but you gotta stop that shit, man. Okay, an attack, like skill checks, can also crit or fumble, and this follows the same rules as a skill critting or fumbling. An attack that crits deals double damage, and an attack that fumbles comes with some sort of consequence, such as the gun jamming up, the weapon getting dropped, or your foes pointing and laughing at you, like really hard. And even though they'll probably just move on and forget about it, sometimes at night when you're in the dark staring up at the ceiling, you'll think about it and wish you had a time machine, and then you'll feel guilty imagining using a time machine for something so astronomically petty. Fumbling attack rolls is really rough. There may be circumstances when you feel like applying a bonus or a penalty in combat. While already rare for skill checks, these should be even more rare for combat circumstances. And no matter how high your bonuses or penalties, a 1 always hits and a roll of 100 always misses. A common bonus to be aware of, though, is the surprise attack bonus. Surprise attacks are exceptionally effective in this game. Basically, if someone is completely helpless in some way, then you don't even need to roll. And if they aren't completely helpless but combat hasn't started yet, not only do you get a 20% bonus, but if you hit, it is automatically a critical hit.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Obviously, a central goal of combat is to inflict damage. Pretty straightforward for the weapons and attacks that have a damage rating represented by some number of dice. If you hit, you get to roll those dice, and the result is how much damage you do, though melee attacks do get an adjustment based on your strength score. If someone's HP reaches 0, they are dead. If they are reduced to 2 or less HP, they are knocked unconscious and they need to make a constitution test. If they fail, they suffer a permanent injury, and the handler chooses a stat to be reduced based on the result of the constitution test. I don't know if I've missed the opportunity to utilize these rules for reaching 2 or lower HP, or if simply every agent I've had that went under 2 HP was also simply just dead, but the permanent injury thing is a neat way for the lasting impact of a near-death experience to be felt. In most other systems, this would feel really bad without some way to regain the stat loss, and technically you could in this game as well by training during downtime, but since a core part of the conceit of this game is to experience the downfall and deterioration of your character, it feels like a great part of the story rather than some sort of arbitrary permanent punishment. That is assuming everyone at the table has agreed to this core conceit, which you definitely should be upfront about so that everyone can be on the same page. In fact, if someone in your group has a bit of a predilection towards crayon consumption, you might want to spend a quick moment making sure you're in the same book, and then make sure you're on the same page. Also, if they take half of their current HP and damage, they are stunned. I'm going to say that twice. Half of their current HP. So the lower their HP is, the more likely they are to get stunned. I repeat, not because I don't trust you, but only because I wasn't paying attention when I first read this, so I think I probably failed to implement this rule at some point or another because I definitely thought it was half of your maximum HP. Being stunned is brutal though. You don't get to act, and you need to pass a contest to be able to act on your next turn. So even if you pass, you're still going to miss out on an entire turn, when one turn is certainly more than enough to get you killed. This is far from the first time I've mentioned failing to implement a rule or missing out on implementing a rule, but I kind of appreciate the versatility of the system in that missing out on some of these rules as we went did not detract from the fun or ruin the balance of the game, and choosing to discard many of the finer rules wouldn't ruin it either, especially given that the heart of the game lies in the story of how someone is undone attempting to stop the incursion of otherworldly threats. It's nice in my mind that these rules are here for some crunch but can be skipped over in a lot of cases if a slightly simpler game is desired, without negatively impacting what lies at the heart of the game. The primary exception being the sanity and especially the bond system, which I will get to in another video. So if you've taken some damage, there are 4 ways to get your HP back: resuscitation, stabilization, treatment, and recuperation. If a character has died, but you can reasonably argue that they could be resurrected and they have not yet been dead for a number of minutes equal to their con score, resuscitation can be attempted. On a successful first aid roll, they regain 1d4 HP, doubled on a crit, and on a failure, they're dead. I don't know what happens on a critical failure. I guess they are twice as dead, since a crit fail is twice as bad as failure. This is another rule I'm interested to hear if anyone has used. I guess if someone suffocated, drowned, or had a heart attack, resuscitation sounds reasonable, but I think all of my agents' deaths have been gunshot wounds or being horribly crushed by some sort of unnamed abomination. It can be kind of hard to argue a point for resuscitation when your forehead is touching the back of your skull. To help keep yourself barely operational while in the field if you are injured, you have stabilization. Stabilization is also a first aid roll, which regains 1d4 HP, doubled on a crit, and can be done to any wounded character. It's worth noting that a fumble does inflict 1d4 damage, so it does have some risk attached. Once you have received first aid though, success or failure, you can't receive it again until you have suffered a new wound. No amount of endlessly fussing over a gunshot wound with a first aid kit is going to completely fix the issue. For that, you'll need proper treatment and recuperation. In order to receive proper treatment, an actual medical facility or aid station with equipment is required. Here, a doctor can make a surgery check if the wounds are quite severe, or a medicine check to heal 1d4 HP, and this roll can be repeated weekly. Again though, a fumble inflicts 1d4 HP damage, so getting out of combat alive doesn't necessarily mean the agent is out of the woods yet, following the rules as written. You need to try to avoid strenuous activity after receiving proper treatment as well. Until you fully recover, you will take 1d4 damage if you attempt any physical stat or physical skill test, as you rip open your stitches, encourage an infection, or agitate a broken or fractured bone. Finally, with recuperation, we're letting the body perform its natural healing. If you have any stat point loss that is only temporary, every day of rest recovers 1 point until the temporary loss is relieved. Additionally, every day an agent rests somewhere safe, supplied with food and water, they can attempt a con test to recover 1 HP. 1d4 HP on a critical success. However, 1 HP is lost on a fumble, so again, even the process of sitting around doing nothing is a bit dangerous if you're near death's door. Which makes sense. It makes the character feel really human, and it adds an uneasy tension to the recovery process. I can't even write a good witticism about this recovery process. It's actually just so Delta Green to survive a gunfight but then expire in the hospital because the recovery process didn't go your way. Again, gotta be on the same page as everyone else at the table, because just dying in bed is going to be super lame in a lot of people's minds if they're expecting the wrong type of game. Besides just being reduced to 0 HP, however, there are other types of damage that cannot be recovered from, such as lethal damage. Some weapons are just so powerful that their damage is expressed not as a number of dice, but as a percentage probability of just outright killing someone. If you hit with one of these weapons, you roll a percentile dice for the damage, and if the result is less than the lethality rating, it just outright kills the target. If you roll above the lethality rating, you add the results of the percentile dice as if they were both d10s, and that is your damage. Some weapons will come with the option of spending some extra ammunition to change their normal damage into a lethality roll. This is done to help speed up complicated situations with, say, fully automatic rifles or machine guns, where it would be really irritating to slow things down and roll for each individual bullet against each individual target. I mentioned in a previous video that Call of Cthulhu is a predecessor to this game, and the pain points of automatic fire in that system were definitely a driving force behind the creation of the lethality system. Basically, you had to determine how many bullets you wanted to fire in a volley, then how many volleys you wanted to fire, then roll to hit for each volley. Then if the volley hits, you roll damage for half of the bullets in the volley, rounded down, unless the volley to hit roll was an extreme success, then every bullet hits. And also, if some of the targets of the volley were different people, then you simulate wasting bullets as you move the gun to different targets. And honestly, it usually just boiled down to being a lot of work to basically just outright kill someone if they were the target of automatic gunfire. That's, in a nutshell, what these lethality rules are trying to represent. There's a reason it's not uncommon to see threads where people are suggesting to take the automatic fire rules out of Call of Cthulhu and substitute them with Delta Green's lethality system. Just trying to save some IRL sanity over the board. Many lethal weapons also have a kill radius. With a kill radius, you apply a lethality roll to every character within the radius on a successful attack. Explosive weapons have larger kill radiuses, and since their radius is so large, you even get a 20% bonus to hit when using one. Regardless of whether or not the attack hits, if you were within the kill radius of an attempted lethal attack roll, unless you are adapted to violence or somehow oblivious to the machine gun fire or explosions happening around you, you risk becoming suppressed. You can either find cover or hit the deck and forfeit your next action, or you can pay 1 sanity to push through the terror and keep on acting normally. Basically, getting shot at with a weapon that has a lethality rating is extremely bad news bears for both your immediate and long-term health and well-being. So that mostly covers killing, being killed, and recovering if you manage not to die when someone tried to kill you, but what about improving your odds of not dying? Well, there are 5 categories of protection an entity in Delta Green can fall under: fragile, exposed, armored, huge, and transcendent. A fragile entity is pretty much a synonym for a meaningless NPC that I don't want to keep track of as a handler. If a fragile entity takes any damage from a source legitimately trying to injure them, they're just dead. Most GMs already do this across systems anyways for NPCs that they don't care about. Who wants to keep track of where Joe Schmoes number 1 through 7 are at HP-wise in a complicated combat? Our dumbasses are already struggling hard enough to remember if a given character is parrying and blocking for the round. We just don't need the extra overhead. The next category is exposed. This is nothing special, it basically just means you're important enough to keep track of your HP and you lack armor. The armored category actually comes in two flavors of its own, body armor and cover. With body armor, you reduce the incoming damage of an attack, but a successful lethality roll still kills you. With cover, on the other hand, lethality checks automatically fail. But if the total damage from the lethality check still is higher than your armor rating from the cover, you take damage. To be fair, a chance to die is quite a bit better than a guarantee. Body armor and cover do stack, but both can have their effectiveness reduced by armor-piercing weapons. Any entity in the huge category, like your mama, is immune to the instant kill aspect of lethality rolls and instead just takes flat HP damage equal to the lethality rating of the weapon. We also have the transcendent category. Transcendent characters such as the Color Out of Space, the Great Old One Azathoth, or a coked up Charlie Sheen are simply immune to any physical damage. And if that wasn't enough detail for how agents can die, we finish this chapter with the Other Threats section, which details other expected sources of death, such as poison, disease, falling, impacting, suffocating, burning, and freezing. Diseases and poisons are covered together as they have some mechanical overlap. With both a disease and a poison, when either enters your system, a certain amount of time will pass before the consequences are felt, sometimes mere turns, sometimes as much as months. Poison is a one-time thing. After the allotted time, a lethality roll is made. If the poison doesn't kill you outright, you can make a con test to reduce the incoming damage, and if you survive, the poison is done. Diseases are recurring, on the other hand, so after the allotted time, you can make a con test, and if you succeed, you take half the damage and recover from the disease, but on a failure, you take full damage, and you'll have to make that con test again after a certain amount of time has passed. Poisons sometimes have antidotes, and diseases sometimes have cures if you can get to a hospital and you know you need the treatment. One thing that definitely sticks out, though, in the sample diseases chart is they list out HIV and AIDS. Everything else in the sample poisons and diseases chart makes so much sense to me. And then with the suddenness and the unpredictability of a homeless man whipping it out on the subway, they hit us with AIDS. Has any agent ever gotten AIDS in a game of Delta Green before? Anyways, as far as falling goes, basically if you fall 1 to 3 meters, you take 1d6 damage, maybe 2d6 if it's extra nasty somehow. Otherwise, you simply treat it as a lethality roll, where the lethality percentage is 1% per meter fallen. Fun fact, they use meters throughout this book, so for the sake of making an easy and consistent ruling, they keep doing this, but 1% lethality per foot fallen over 9 feet would be pretty dang accurate, actually. The odds of dying from a 50-foot fall are about 48%, which is pretty dang close. Also, fun fact, an average HP character has a 1% chance of surviving an 80-meter fall, and a max HP character has a 1% chance of surviving a 97-meter fall. I'm not 100% sure why, but I always like picking apart falling rules in games. From a design standpoint, it definitely makes sense to just make something quick and easy for the falling rules since they don't come up that often. I think it's possible that the origin of the falling rules curiosity was learning in Dungeons & Dragons that technically, rules as written, a level 20 Raging Barbarian can be utilized as an orbital drop shock trooper. You can also die from an impact, such as being in a moving vehicle when it slams into a barrier. 10% lethality for every 40 kilometers per mile or 25 miles per hour. Doubled lethality if it's straight into something like a brick wall that prevents the vehicle from tumbling through the impact. More fun facts, this means a max HP agent has a 7% chance of surviving a 399 kilometer per hour or 249 mile per hour impact, and an average HP agent has a 1% chance of surviving a 359 kilometer per hour impact or a 225 mile per hour impact. Once again, these numbers are incredibly generous compared to real life, but probably won't come into play all that often anyways. Honestly, with weird little rules like falling or impacting, I bet most handlers just grab a number of d6 that seems fair to them in the moment, and then they just roll that instead of looking it up and figuring out the finer details. You can also suffocate. If you manage to get a big gulp of air before being unable to breathe, you can go con times 5 turns without breathing. After that, you make a con test every turn. Failure costs 1d6 HP, success still costs 1 HP, and the rolls continue every turn until you can breathe or you suffocate. If you don't get that big breath in, the contests start immediately and last until someone clears your airways. That seems a little bit unclear to me as written, but I would interpret it as you are either conscious or unconscious when you no longer have access to air. So you get con times 5 turns without air if you are conscious, otherwise the damage rolls start immediately. As written, a rule is only 10 seconds or so. So these suffocation rules would be like saying, if I exhale and then don't breathe for just 10 seconds, I could start to die and need my airway cleared by a paramedic, which is obviously ridiculous. I mean, watch. With fire, they have intensity and damage and, forget it. I'll do it later. Okay. With fire, they have intensity and damage, and every turn you spend exposed to a certain intensity of fire, you take that amount of damage. When reasonable, a failed dex roll will also catch you on fire, and then you'll take half of the damage from exposure every round, even if you aren't exposed to the flame anymore, until you put yourself out. More fun facts: rules as written, a max HP character could theoretically survive 69 seconds of exposure to a blast furnace if they didn't catch on fire. Nice. Finally, we can die to cold exposure. When exposed to freezing temps, unprepared, you can last for con minutes, moderately prepared, you can last for con times 5 minutes, and if you're quite well prepared, you could last for con hours. After that, you start slowly freezing. Once you start slowly freezing, you make a con test every 5 minutes. A failure will reduce your con by 1, and once you're reduced to 1 con, you can no longer move, and you start taking 1d8 cold damage every 5 minutes. Warmth and shelter will restore 1 con per minute. Again, technically, rules as written, an average unprepared agent could succumb to bone-chilling 30-degree Fahrenheit weather, being unable to move due to this horrible permafrost-inducing freeze after just 95 minutes. And doomed to die within the hour. As a Minnesotan, this is absolutely comical. But as always with these alternative damage types, just use your better judgment rather than your pedantic judgment, as tempting as that may be. And that is it for combat in Delta Green. There are sanity-related implications to combat, but I'll cover those in the next video. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've made it this far into the video, leave a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and even if you don't feel like doing either of those things, time is the one currency that cannot be recovered when spent. So thank you very much for giving me some of yours today. Have a good one.